Hey guys, what's up? My name is Annie O'Malley and welcome to the first episode of the All the Things That Scare Me series. I'm an independent singer-songwriter and my sophomore album, All the Things That Scare Me, will be out on September 18th, 2024. And I was thinking about all the things that I could do to roll it out, and there's a lot. But one of the things I wanted to do on YouTube was take you through the entire process of creating this album. Hence, it took me 2.5 years to write, record, and roll out this entire project, and finally it's going to be out in a month. So let's go all the way back to November 11th of 2022. That was when I released my debut album, Scrapbook. That project was basically about living in LA for the first time and all the things I was experiencing, and I was playing with sounds and I didn't even know how much was possible as somebody who came from the Midwest and would just write with her piano and guitar. So all of a sudden I was working with new management and I was in all these sessions and I was like, I didn't even know that all of this existed. So I started writing songs and releasing singles, and eventually I realized that that was my first album. But that was sort of the first time I experienced working on a really long-term project like that, where it takes months and there's so many moving parts and you have to be the one dictating everything. You have to make sure all the mixes are getting done, and because if the mixes aren't done, they can't get to the masters, or if you don't have the cover art, then now you're behind because you can't release a song because you need the cover art, and then now you got to scramble to do a shoot. Like, there's so much that goes into it. It's like an assembly line, and you're the one planning and running all of it if you're independent, which I proudly am. So something that's really interesting about when I'm writing my albums and my projects and my songs, there's always a day where that era is over and there's like a shift in the air. It's a feeling that that chapter of my life is closed. And it's so prominent, it's so real, I can't even describe it to you, but that happened the day my album Scrapbook came out. I'm gonna dump it all right here because you know what? It's 2.5 years ago, so who cares? On November 12th, I was at a release party and I saw somebody that I used to talk to, and things were weird. And we were kind of talking, and he was congratulating me for the album and how proud he was of me and all these things. And I'm nervous to tell the story on the internet because Okay, anyway, so we were talking and I was dating somebody at the time, but that was a whole other situation, which is a whole nother project and album. We're not even going to get into that yet. But that was coming to an end, and I could tell. And that was happening that night as well. So anyway, there was a lot going on. And I was in my head, I was all over the place, and I was obsessively thinking at this party. So I leave the party, I'm freaking out, I get in my car, and I just start writing. And so many things are in my mind, and I'm starting to write the beginning of Celebrations and Obsessive Thoughts. Now, the next day I woke up, I realized I had a session with my producer, Nige, and we had just started working together, so I think we'd only done maybe 1 or 2 songs together. So the next day I go to the session, and, he starts creating a track and building something out, and it sounds awesome, and it's this epic pop song. I'm like, oh, I wrote lyrics last night, this is perfect, I'm gonna use these. So, I'm doing that, I'm writing the chorus, blah, 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 writing the top line, and it ends up being Celebrations and Obsessive Thoughts. And that was a completely new sound from Scrapbook, from anything I had ever done ever, and I was obsessed. I left that studio session and I played that song in my car 100 times that night, and I couldn't stop listening to it, and I was like, this is my favorite song I've ever written, this is my favorite pop song ever, I'm obsessed. So a couple weeks later, we have another session, and I write my song Close the Door. Same thing, same vibe, comes together. Hour and a half later, we got a song, start tracking, whatever. It just was so seamless, it was so natural, it was so easy, and it was so fast, and it was so fun because I was really, really, really inspired by this. And I feel like there's this weird thing as an artist where you're in between wanting to do things that would impress yourself, like you felt when you first found your favorite artist, but you're also I'm me though, so I'm never going to feel the way that about myself that I do about other artists. And so then the other side of you is I'm just me. So it's this weird thing where it's you want to impress yourself, but you also want to make sure that you're staying authentic to what's natural to you. Fast forward about another month later, we have another session. And that is when I wrote Together Forever. And at this point, I knew I had a sound. This was something that was a project, and I realized this was my second album. Once I did those 3, I was like, these are so cohesive. They're just different. They're emotive. They're expressive. They're like ADHD music is what I felt like. And at this time, I finally finished school. And that I'm going to get to a little bit later. But that is why I started writing so much about my school trauma and my experience with school. And that weight was lifted off my chest. So once I realized that this was a project, this was my sophomore album, I was like, okay, what's the color scheme? What's the world that I'm creating? What's the point of it? Why does it matter? Because for me, I can't just release music. I can't just make songs and be like, this is a cool song, like, here we go. And honestly, that might actually be a setback because everything has to be a big deal to me. That's how I am in my real life. That's how I am with everything. That's how I am with my art. And so immediately what I started doing was like Pinterest boards, mood boards, all this kind of stuff. Wrap my room in it. I'm like, it needs to be everywhere. It needs to be the only thing I see and think about. So I started doing that. I realized the themes, the concepts, all of it. And at this time, I was really, really thinking about my brand. Why do I expect other people to invite me into their life? What do I have to offer that is going to persuade people to be like, I want your music to be the soundtrack to my life. I want to invite you into my life. I want to experience vulnerable moments with your music, with you. Like, how could I expect people to do that if I didn't have something that really, really mattered, especially to me and then hopefully to everybody else? So I started thinking about that a lot, and I was like, what's my mission? My mission is to show the people that were told they were too dramatic, too sensitive, too emotional, too soft, that their sensitivity is their superpower. You do not want to run from it, but you want to befriend it. And that is what this entire project is about. It's befriending that inner child, the person inside of you that was larger than life, that just wanted to play, that just wanted to make friends, that just wanted to have a good time, wasn't afraid of judgment, wasn't afraid of what other people thought, wasn't afraid to be themselves. It's befriending that person again. Because when we tell people to avoid their emotions and that there's a certain way to be human, you rob them of a piece that they deserve. And we don't want to continue that. And so this album is me confronting the monsters under my bed and doing it with compassion and realizing you're not a monster. You're just another part of me that I haven't wanted to look at and I've been afraid to look at, but really we're one. And I can be honest with myself that like not everything about me is going to be perfect and it can all be there. So I went on a deep dive. I rewrote my bio. I worked on my website. I did the whole thing. I created a world that everyone can be in, that everyone can enjoy, that everyone can be themselves. And I wanted that to be obvious visually. So once I started writing all these songs and I started getting them produced and I was, getting inspired by the sound and everything that I was making, I wanted to figure out my own name for the music I was creating. I felt like there wasn't a genre name that classified it well. 60% pop, it's like 20% drum and bass and like 20% hyper pop. I decided to call that Temper Tantrum Pop. I would say this whole album is Temper Tantrum Pop. It's expressive and emotive, but it's colorful and it's fun and it's not dark. I wanted the music to be the opposite of being afraid. I wanted the music to be inviting everything in. So anyway, that's when I came up with Temper Tantrum Pop. It's also like Adderall indie pop and like video game pop and like ADHD pop and like you ate a lot of Skittles and like now your blood sugar spiked. So this is when I threw myself into sessions. I was in sessions like 5 to 6 days a week. I was writing constantly. I'd go to a session, come home, I'd write more. It was really cool because I worked with a lot of producers for the first time. My first album, I only had 3 producers on it. And this album, there's 7 producers. And I worked with some new ones that I had never, met before this project or that I had never worked with or I'd never had a cut with. So that was really fun. I'm really excited about the producers that have worked on this project. They're extremely talented. They really, really got my vision. And I felt like as long as I was the common denominator, I could work with all these different producers and it would still be cohesive. And I really, really do feel like it's cohesive lyrically, thematically, and musically. All right. That's weird. My grandma passed away a month ago and we've been saying that she comes as a butterfly and that butterfly poster just fell. Hey Barb. So here's how I realized what my album really was and what the name of the album was going to be.